Hey, what's up guys? This is Dennis with 21 Grams. On today's video, we're going to go over how to make this custom DIY card wallet together. We are going to go step by step in how to do every single thing within the process. Some of the techniques that I show in this video may not be traditional, but they do work for me, and I hope they work for you as well. I want to give a big thank you to today's video sponsor, Tandy. Tandy is the one-stop shop for all of your leather needs. With over 100 years of experience, Tandy knows the leather community. With that said, let's get this tutorial started. First thing that you're going to need is a business card and some graph paper. You're going to make a mark 1 square on the outside of your business card and 2 squares on the inside of your card to find the center line. Drop down 2 squares below the business card. Now you're going to connect the outside line with the inside line. And with a straight edge, you're going to connect all of the straight lines together. Now you're going to cut out the pattern that we just drew. I always recommend a steel ruler with a cork bottom on it to help prevent slipping. Once you cut out the original pattern, find the center line, fold it over, and trace the same thing on the other side. It's always good to check your work as you go, and in this case, checking for seam allowance is very crucial. Once you have your top pattern cut out, drop it onto a separate piece of graph paper, drop 2 squares below the original. Now you simply just have to trace it and cut it out, but be sure to leave 2 extra squares at the bottom of your original pattern. Once your pattern is completely cut out, double check and make sure that the card fits and allows for seam allowance. Once you're happy with the pattern, get a piece of cardstock or a cereal box and attach the graph paper with a glue stick. Gluing your pattern to cardstock will prolong the life of the pattern so you can use it multiple times. Now simply just cut your pattern out of the cardstock. As a helpful reminder, I always write on the pattern which is top and which is bottom. The bottom is going to be the bigger of the two. Once you have the patterns on cardstock and cut out, you're going to get a piece of tracing paper and trace the top pattern on top of that. Allow yourself a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch border that your drawing will sit inside of. Leave room for your maker's mark. Now the fun part, friends. Let's get to drawing. With any kind of drawing, I always recommend 2 things. Have good reference in front of you and start by sketching out shapes. With the first layer of yellow, I'm just trying to get big blocky shapes in and create some kind of flow. Now with the second layer, using a slightly darker shade of pink, I am refining my original drawing and creating consistency throughout the drawing. In the third layer, I'm using a dark red and focusing on smooth lines throughout the entire drawing. Once I'm happy with the drawing, I switch over to a black felt tip pen, continuing to refine each and every line. By drawing the rows over and over again, you're creating muscle memory that creates even better flow for your drawing. Now it's time to pick out the right kind of leather for our project. I like to use a 4 to 5 ounce natural veg tan. This happens to be European Bend from Tandy Leather that I've absolutely fallen in love with. Trace your patterns using a scratch-awl onto your leather. This particular scratch-awl, I dulled the tip a little bit just so it was less abrasive on the leather. That helps prevent any snagging as well. Once you have the outline of your pattern traced onto your leather, cut as close to that outline as possible to prevent any loss of material. A tip I find useful is scoring your leather on the first pass. This creates a groove for the next passes, as well as helps prevent slipping. Take your time cutting out your pattern because it is the foundation of your entire project. Once I have my 2 patterns cut out, I'll run them through the Tandy Pro burnishing machine to make sure that they're both evened up and consistent. Prepping your natural veg tan is very easy. Using painter's tape or packing tape on the back side of your natural veg tan leather will help prevent stretching in the tooling portion of this project. I like to cut the excess tape off as close to the leather as possible to prevent my hand from sticking to it in future portions of this project. Once your natural veg tan leather is prepped, dampen your leather till it's soaked 1/3 of the way through. I like to use plastic wrap to create a barrier between the wet leather and the tracing paper. If this video has been useful for you so far, please consider subscribing. You want to create a tight seal to help prevent any wrinkles or folds in your plastic wrap. That's going to make it easier when you transfer your drawing onto your leather. Now that there's a barrier to protect the tracing paper from the wet leather, you're going to attach your drawing to the top. Make sure that that is secure so it doesn't move around when you're tracing your drawing. Tracing your drawing with a ballpoint pen will ensure a nice indentation on your vegetable tan leather. I like to work from one end of the drawing to the other end of the drawing to help ensure not missing any lines throughout the process. Carefully remove your drawing from the plastic wrap and the plastic wrap from your leather. I personally like to keep all of my drawings to reference at a later day and to see the progression of my work. This is where things start getting a little untraditional. I don't use a traditional swivel knife. What I've done is removed the blade from my swivel knife and attached it into a tattoo tube. Because I have a background in tattooing, this is far more comfortable for me, and it may just work for you as well. When cutting your design into your leather, I always recommend cutting in about 1/3 of the depth of the leather. Something that I find useful is cutting all of the same lines going in the same direction at the same time. This repetition creates muscle memory and leaves you with far cleaner lines. You want to keep your leather damp, but not oversaturated. Oversaturation will lead to what's best described as a muddy feeling. This will lead to your stamps not having a sharp indentation in the leather. I like to always start with the checkered stamp tool. This is where we're going to do the darkest shading later. Then I switch to a smooth beveling tool starting from the outside of the image, working our way to the inside of the image. When using any beveling stamping tool, I always recommend moving 1/2 the length of the last indentation you just made. This leaves you with the most consistent and smoothest looking final image. For fine-tuning your image, I always recommend the Craft Tool Pro modeling spoons from Tandy. They work wonders. Using this tool around your image is going to smooth out the leather and will eliminate any sharp points that can later get snagged while taking it in and out of your pocket. And most importantly, it leaves you with a finished professional look. I start every painting by applying an even coat of EcoFlow water stain. This sets up a solid foundation for the rest of the painting portion of this project. For each and every single color in this project, I first set down the foundation of the EcoFlow water stain. It seals the leather, and it makes the more dense pigment easier to apply later in this project. Now that we have the foundation set up of the EcoFlow water stain, we are going to now start building up with more dense pigment. What I'm using here is Angelus acrylic leather paint. Now we are going to start building up our highlights. To do so, you're going to take the lighter version of each color and apply that pigment to where the light would hit the object. You're going to continue adding a lighter value of the same color to create a nice blend and smooth fade. The last pigment that you're going to apply before shading is going to be white. This is going to make the entire image really pop. At the beginning of mapping out this drawing, we left room for our maker's mark, and this is where we're going to apply it. Now that everything is in place, we're going to fill in the background. I prefer outlining the entire image about 1/4 of an inch around the entire thing. It's important that you take your time on this step. Slow and steady wins the race in this case. After outlining the entire image, you can move to a bigger brush and start filling in the complete background. Moving on to the bottom piece, I wanted to use a contrasting color. I went with red to match the rose on the top piece. Because we are using acrylic paint, I always recommend an acrylic finisher on top of your piece. Evenly apply this across both top piece and bottom piece. We are now going to move on to edging both the top piece and the bottom piece of our project. For this wallet, I'm using the Tandy Pro Edge Beveler number 1. Everything is nice and lined up. Let's move on to burnishing the edges. Just put a thin layer of burnishing solution on the edges of your project. If you don't have a Tandy Pro variable speed burnisher, you can always just use a wood slicker. Your only objective is to create friction and knock down the fibers and smooth out the edges. Burnishing solution can also be used on the rough side of leather to smooth it down. This glass slicker creates friction and knocks down the fibers to smooth out the rough side of the leather. With your compass set at about 1/4 of an inch, mark out your stitch line. I'm using the Tandy Pro Octagon pricking irons. Okay, let's start stitching. One of the most important tips that I can pass on is using rubber finger gloves on your pointer fingers. This gives you incredible grip and helps prevent calluses. If you aren't familiar with saddle stitching, there are a lot of great videos here on YouTube, and I'll be putting out one soon. It will be an entire video dedicated to saddle stitching. I like using these flat cobbler pliers to flatten out my stitching. Now that the stitching is completed, we are going to finish the bottom edge of our wallet. Pay close attention while sanding the bottom edge. You don't want to remove too much material. I apply a small amount of water to the rough edge. We are going to give it a pass through the burnishing machine. I'll go back and forth from the burnishing wheel to the sanding wheel. Now we're going to apply burnishing solution to the bottom edge. One last pass on the burnishing wheel. This edge is almost there. I like to use a very fine grit sandpaper to smooth everything out. One last coat of burnishing solution. Then hand polish with a piece of canvas.